There used to be people here. Thousands, if not tens of thousands, of men, women, and children. Now, most of them are gone. Not killed. Not abducted. No bloody war or grand exodus. They're just gone. I'm the only one who seems to remember them. According to Dr. Wakefield, that makes me special. Humans are disappearing, but they're disappearing quietly, whispers drowned out by the buzzing of locusts. We need people who can hear the whispers. We need people who remember. My eyes scanned the endless vacant sidewalks and empty storefronts, a barren landscape that had once been my hometown. Feeling my teeth begin to chatter, I reached out and attempted to increase the heat, but my car's AC couldn't go any higher. Per my dashboard, the temperature was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Not sure precisely what's happening in your neck of the woods, but it's not typically below freezing outside during the summer, not in Georgia, at least. The hum of my sedan's tired engine began overpowering the pop song playing over the radio, but I barely noticed. My attention was stuck on the objects lurking in my glove compartment. I couldn't stop imagining them rattling around in there. These tools, they were things that didn't belong to me. Things you hide from plain view because of their implications. Not that I needed to hide them. I could have left them on my back seats, half concealed under a litany of fast food wrappers. Hell, I could have let them ride shotgun, flaunting my violent intent loud and proud. Wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. Who was left to hide them from? The police station was abandoned too. As I passed through a rural neighborhood, I spotted what looked to be a family stacking cut lumber into neat little piles on their front porch. They darted inside when they saw me coming. I'm sure they didn't comprehend the magnitude of what had been transpiring, but that didn't mean their survival instincts were off the mark. Bunkering down is the only safe option for 99.9% of the population. Going outside exponentially increases your chance of seeing him, Dr. Wakefield said, and once you saw him, well, it was much, much too late. Erasure was imminent. That's what made me special, though. I could see him without succumbing. Moreover, I had seen him. Plenty of times. When I described him to Dr. Wakefield, her pupils widened to the size of marbles. That man I saw? She claimed it wasn't a man at all. Oh, no no no. He was something else. A force of nature. A boogeyman. A tried and true demon, hell-bent on our eradication. He's a grift. Thankfully, Dr. Wakefield said that meant he was sort of human. When I finally found him, sitting on a bench at the outskirts of town, I parked far enough away to avoid suspicion. I clicked open the glove compartment, and for a moment, I wasn't nervous, nor was I concerned about the morality of what I was about to do. Instead, I felt the warmth of a smoldering ember inside my chest. I was about to do something important. Heroic, even. This was for all the people only I could remember. I pulled out the bottle of chloroform and the rag. This was for the hundreds of poor souls that thing erased. I fanned the flames roiling under my ribs as I snuck up behind him, so that when I covered his squirming mouth with the anesthetic-soaked rag, they'd blossomed into a full-on wildfire. When Dr. Wakefield claimed I was special, she right, but, God, she was wrong about so much else. Lugging him into the church was a backbreaking endeavor. His winter coat kept catching on the terrain, and if I let go of his legs, even for a moment, he'd threaten to topple down the hill, limp body rolling all the way back to the parking lot. The worst part? Dr. Wakefield and the others couldn't assist. Apparently, the mere sight of this thing could send them spiraling into erasure, even if he was unconscious. He was one heavy-ass contagion, I'll say that. I truly doubted I'd finish the climb when I hit the halfway point. My calf muscles sizzled with lactic acid. My lungs screamed for more oxygen, but my breathing was a mess, shallow inhales coupled with ragged exhales. I sounded like an ancient chew toy squeaking in the jaws of a mastiff. I'm sure it was a pathetic display. Thankfully, I had no audience. At the edge of passing out, I peeked over my shoulder. Lucky timing. A few more sweat-drenched back pedals and my ankle would have unexpectedly knocked into the cathedral's wooden stoop. If I stumbled and lost my grip on him, his body could have easily gained momentum on the incline, and it was a long, long way down, not that I was afraid of hurting him. I just didn't want to start over. With one last heave, I pulled him onto the stoop and promptly collapsed. I could practically feel my heartbeat in my teeth. I summoned a modicum of strength, sat upright, turned towards the grift, and slapped him hard across the face. He didn't move an inch. Chloroform really is some powerful voodoo. With my safety confirmed, I fell back onto the stoop. I looked towards the sky, but all I saw were puffs of my hot breath dissipating into the frigid atmosphere. The sun hadn't been visible for weeks now, day in and day out. A combination of thick cloud cover and dense mist had swallowed our town whole. Dr. Wakefield wasn't sure what to make of that, but she assumed it was related. Incrementally, my breaths became fuller. I creaked my torso upright, slid forward, and swung my legs over the edge. I'd never been the God-fearing type, but the panoramic view of town from the top of that hill was an honest divinity. I felt my lips curl into a frown. The blanket of hazy white fog hampered the normally pristine sight. I could appreciate the silhouettes of buildings and other structures I'd known my whole life, but their finer details were hidden. A chill slithered down my spine. In a way, the scene was a sort of allegory. I could remember the tone of my mother's voice, this crisp and gentle melody, but the color of her eyes eluded me. Andrew's eyes were greenish blue, like the surface of a lake. That was one detail I was sure of when it came to my fiancé. But his voice? Can't recall. Not a single word. In the grift's wake, he'd become a phantom, silent and ethereal. Like the view, my memories were all just silhouettes. Distant figures cloaked within a ravenous smog. I don't know what happened to them, but, somehow, I'd held on to a few fragments. Don't get me wrong, it was more of a blessing than a curse. Sam and Leah still had each other, sure, but they had lost everyone else. No memories of the erased whatsoever. They could see the absence, those harrowingly empty spaces, but they couldn't recall what had been there before. Broke my heart to see Sam unable to remember his own father. A tender man who had practically raised me too. I'd take ghosts in a fog over a perfect darkness. My head snapped to the side at the sound of garbled murmuring. My captive's lips were quivering, the grift's sedation was thinning. I shot to my feet. My legs felt like taffy, but a burst of adrenaline kept my body rigid enough to function. I propped open the heavy wooden double doors, grabbed the grift's legs, and hauled him into the church. To be clear, Dr. Wakefield hadn't selected the location for religious reasons. Sam, Leah, and I weren't helping her coordinate some harebrained exorcism. It was simply the only place I knew of that had a windowless, soundproofed room. In the 90s, a gospel choir based out of the church developed quite a bit of popularity among nearby parishes. They wanted to record a CD or two, but didn't want to use a traditional studio for the process, what with the loose morals and the designer drugs rampant within the music industry. Thus, they built their own. Repurposed a small room behind the pulpit for that exact purpose. It certainly wasn't completely soundproofed, but it'd have to do in a pinch. I pulled the grift along the rug between the pews. The fabric rubbing against his coat made one hell of a racket, this high-pitched squealing that sounded like the death rattles of a gutted pig. As I approached the pulpit, he began to stir. His eyelids fluttered and his muscles twitched. I picked up the pace, nearly tripping over my own feet as I rounded the corner. I entered a small antechamber with a desktop computer and a few acoustic guitars hanging on the walls. With the last morsels of energy I had available, I threw open another door, and dragged the grift into the sound booth. His new cage, panting, I spun around. There was someone behind me. I jumped back and clutched my chest. Before I could start berating my stalker, relief washed over me. "You idiot," I whispered. I stared at myself in the mirror we had nailed to the back of the door. The peculiar bit of interior design was, evidently, a safety measure. According to Dr. Wakefield, the reflective glass would act as a barrier against the grift escaping, but it wasn't just my reflection in the mirror. There was the outline of the man I'd chloroformed behind me, too, laying face down on the floor, no doubt the proud owner of some new bumps and bruises thanks to yours truly. How'd this all get so fucked up, I wondered. Is this who I am now? I didn't have time to ruminate on the thought. My eyes widened as I watched the man begin to sit up in the reflection. I sprinted to the door and swung it open. He shouted at me as I ran, "Wait!" I made it to the other side, placed my shoulder against the frame, and pushed hard. It shut with a thunderous crash. For obvious reasons, the knob hadn't been installed with a lock, so I shoved a heavy end table in front to barricade the exit. Between that and the mirror, Dr. Wakefield felt we would be safe. 30 minutes later, at the opposite end of the church, I began knocking on a different door. At first, no one answered. "Hello?" I called out, cupping my ear to the wood. For what felt like the 50th time that day, my heart rate accelerated, thumping against my rib cage with an erratic rhythm. Before panic could truly take hold, I remembered, sorry. I murmured. I knocked again, but with a pattern, and I heard the lock click. We'd decided on the passcode before I departed earlier that morning, though the word decided may make it sound more unanimous than it actually was. Sam suggested the intro guitar riff from the White Stripes' Blue Orchid. I grinned and said that worked on my end. Leah rolled her eyes at the exchange, which was par for the course. Dr. Wakefield said I don't give a shit what it is, as long as one of you can verify it. My best friend, his longtime partner, and the so-called leader of our amateur task force walked out of the bishop's abandoned office, joining me in the cathedral proper. "Sorry about that, V. Just had to be sure it was really you," Sam said. He tried to smile, but the corners of his mouth didn't appear to cooperate. They looked like a pair of buoys rising and falling as waves moved over the surface of the ocean, never quite at the same height at the same time. "Don't apologize. Precautions are a necessity," Dr. Wakefield grumbled. She didn't look up from her open laptop as she paced by, frizzy gray mane bouncing on her shoulders as she marched. She planted her gaunt body onto a pew, and its squeaky whine echoed through the church. With her laptop perched on her lap, she pulled out a cell phone and began dialing. Leah squeezed herself behind Sam's frame like a shadow and didn't say a word. I caught her quietly whistling and couldn't help but twist the knife. "Oh, so we like Blue Orchid now, huh?" I chirped. "Never said I didn't like it, Vanessa," she replied. Sam turned and tried to pull his girlfriend into a hug, but she darted backwards. "Not now, Sam." His eyes jumped between us. He scratched his head and almost started a sentence, but the words seemed to wither and die before they could spill from his lips. I loved Sam. Truly, I loved him like a brother. That said, he served much better as a wall than he did as a referee. "Guys, can we?" He began, but Dr. Wakefield's shouts interrupted him. "Who's your handler?" I said, "Who's your handler? Roscosmos? ISRO? CNSA?" I leaned over to Sam. "Any idea who she's talking to?" I whispered. He looked at me and shrugged. After a few minutes, she hung up, slammed her laptop shut, laid both items on the pew, and paced back over to us. "I'm assuming you were successful?" she asked. I nodded. "Good. The situation is becoming progressively more complex. I've always suspected the grift was more of a network than a single, isolated entity, and I seem to be receiving intel that confirms the assertion, more and more with each passing hour." Her head tilted up to the ceiling, and she went silent. I'd only known Dr. Wakefield for a few days, but I was quickly becoming accustomed to her quirks, and this was certainly one of them. The woman was clearly intelligent. Almost to her own detriment. Sometimes, she'd be laboring on about a particular topic, only to abruptly stop halfway through the ad-libby dissertation, often mid-sentence. I don't think her speech actually stopped, however. I think it continued, but only within the confines of her skull. I certainly wasn't an expert at navigating her eccentricities, but I had learned a thing or two. For example, I didn't disrupt her internal monologues, as informing her that she was no longer speaking seemed to spark anger. More importantly, she'd just start over from the top. Patience was key. Her brain and vocal cords would reconnect, eventually, so, we waited. In the meantime, I closed my eyes and listened to Leah softly whistle. Out of the blue, Dr. Wakefield resumed speaking, one thing at a time though, I suppose. Humanity's weathered harsher storms. I allowed my eyelids to creak open. Dr. Wakefield was looking right at me. This was a crucial victory. We have one of them now. As much as it may despise us, its consciousness has likely blended with our own. In other words, it should want to live. The grift has probably been corrupted by survival instinct. It has something to lose, and that's our leverage. We can force it to give us information. We can make it tell us everything. Hundreds of tiny blood vessels swam through the whites of her eyes. A myriad of red larvae wriggling under her conjunctiva, searching for something to eat. I couldn't remember when Dr. Wakefield last slept. To my surprise, Leah chimed in. Okay, but what if it doesn't? What if it won't fold? Or what if it tries to hurt Vanessa? You say it won't, but this is uncharted territory. Shouldn't she go in with a way to protect herself? Or maybe we just kill it and save ourselves the trouble. Sam smiled at her, but she didn't turn to face him. Yeah, I think she's got a point. Sam turned back to Dr. Wakefield. V should be able to kill it, right? I can give her my pocket knife. The grizzled old woman seemed to contemplate the notion. Alternatively, she wasn't listening and thinking about something else entirely. It was always so difficult to tell. Yes, well, I suppose it couldn't hurt to lend her the knife, but I don't know that we should kill it empirically. Not yet, at least. Since you're able to remember, it shouldn't be able to harm you. That said, data is scarce. If it threatens you, just leave the room. The mirror will deter it, or it will fall victim to its own hunger and walk willingly into a more permanent means of containment. If you find yourself in a predicament and can't safely escape, put the knife to its throat. Theoretically, you should be able to kill the part of it that's human. Sam reached into his pocket and handed me the small blade. Thanks. Wish me luck, I guess. Dr. Wakefield grabbed my arm and violently spun me towards her. I'd heard her instructions 20 times over by that point, but she was nothing if not thorough. Ask it the 3 questions. Don't let it play games with you. If you feel threatened, leave immediately. I shook my head up and down and attempted to step back, but that only caused her to pull me in closer. She was stronger than she looked, those questions are. She prompted. I swallowed hard and tried to compose myself. Where did you come from? What do you want? Her stare intensified. I gagged at the sight of her bloodshot capillaries, imagining those little red worms writhing within her eye until one of them was smart enough to pierce her flesh and pop out the front. Then, they'd all spill out, and... She growled, why does it sound like you're always singing? I expected him to leap up and attack me on sight, or at least do something that was emotionally equivalent. Brandish a weapon. Scream at me. Weep and plead. At worst, I anticipated he'd drop the facade and reveal his true, eldritch form, irreparably scarring my mind and rendering me a miserable husk of broken flesh. That is not what he did. I discovered the man was awake and sitting against the wall opposite the door. He waved at me as I crept in. Hey there, stranger. It's been a minute, he remarked. I froze. He tilted his head and chuckled. You all right there, sunshine? A deluge of sweat dripped down the small of my back. I had braced myself for a lot. I hadn't braced myself for cheerful indifference. Seconds clicked forward. He simply watched and waited for me to do something. Eventually, my brain thawed. Where are you from? WHY, the man cut me off. Atlanta. Very kind of you to ask. He peered at his hands and began digging dirt out from under his nails. I tried to continue. Why does it always sound like you're singing? His eyes met my own, and the look he gave me was different. some combination of rage and desperation. It was an expression that seemed to exert a physical pressure against my body, causing me to step back and lean my shoulder blades against the mirror. It only lasted for a moment. Then, he broke eye contact and went back to excavating his nail beds. He clicked his tongue and spoke again. "What would you have done if I was hiding next to the door?" I ignored him. "What do you want? Why does it always sound like you're singing?" He pointed to the space directly to my left. I could have pressed my body against the wall. "Waited for you to come in. The door would have swung into me. You think you would have figured out where I was quick enough?" The question rattled me, and I went off script. "Why are you erasing us?" His stare resumed at triple the intensity. "What do you mean, erase?" he asked. None of it was going to plan. My hand started reaching for the doorknob. Once again, he pulled his suffocating gaze away from me, put it to the floor. "Kid, I think you're in over your head. Trust me when I say that I know the feeling. Moreover, I think we got off on the wrong foot. My name's Vikram. I used to work for the government. I'm also searching for someone who's been well, erased is a good way to put it." My eyes drifted away from the man. Nausea began twisting in my stomach. My hand rested on the knob but did not turn it. Had we gotten something wrong? Who was this man? Did I really kidnap some innocent stranger? A flash of movement wrenched my eyes forward. The man was sprinting at full force in my direction. I ripped the door open, leapt into the antechamber, and threw my body against the frame. There was a sickening crunch and a yelp of pain. The tips of two of his fingers were preventing from completely closing the door. A surge of barbaric energy exploded through my body. Without thinking, I pulled the door back an inch, and then launched myself at the frame. More crackling snaps. Another wail of agony. Neither sound convinced me to falter. I slammed the door on his fingers again, and again, and again. The fifth time, it finally shut. I scrambled to push the end table against the door. Once it was in place, I bolted out of the antechamber and into chapel. Sam and Dr. Wakefield heard the commotion and were coming to investigate. I nearly trampled the old woman as I turned the corner, but stopped myself just in time. What the hell is going on back there?" Sam barked. I collapsed to the floor and rested my head against the wall, catching my breath before I spoke. I'm not sure he's a grift. Somehow he remembers people. Like me. What are the odds of that? Sam spun around and began pacing in front of the pulpit, hands behind his head. Dr. Wakefield, once again, appeared to be lost in thought. That time, though, my assumption was wrong. She was listening. I'll be eternally grateful for that. When I asked the question, "Where's Leah?" she did not hesitate. She responded exactly as Sam did, and the combination of their responses changed everything. He only got a few words out. "She's in the car." At the same time, Dr. Wakefield said, "Who's Leah?"